incrementally all the way down, and hopefully trying to retain this. Hey guys, this is Nate with BleepinJeep. It's winter, it's very cold, but I have some sliders to build. Let's do this. I'm pretty excited to get started on this project. It's been way too long since I've been able to work on the J10. I went ahead and pulled off the old steps. They're only held on by 3 bolts, but man, they were rigid. I was very surprised at how rigid you could make something with such little hardware. But they were not going to fit the bill of what I want. They only went from there to like there, and I want something that's going to go from the rear of the front fender flare to the front of the rear fender flare. There's a few other design elements that I want to incorporate with this. I liked the way the front bumper turned out, so I want the sliders to match it. We're going to incorporate dimple dies. I want to have some flat surfaces going to round surfaces like that. I think that looks cool. So what I'm thinking is, we're going to build like a rubber rail that's going to go from the front to the back and then mount to the frame out of this 2x2 square tubing. And then we are going to bend some 1 3/4 tube, and that's what's actually going to be the outside of the slider. And somehow we're going to put some dimple die action in there. So let's get started. I think the mounting plates are a good place to start. So we're going to cut this up, drill some holes in it, figure out some good spots to mount it on the frame, and go from there. I weld stuff like this together in order to make it to where I only have to drill 4 holes, and now all my plates are done. So I'm going to grind this weld off of each side, clean these up a little bit, figure out where I'm going to mount them. I found 3 pretty easy locations to mount these. The front one I'm actually going to modify just a hair, because I think that where this factory step mounted, I don't know if it was factory or not, but the one that came with the Jeep is a pretty good location, so I can just reuse these old bolts that are sticking out. Maybe just drill 1 new hole, and we'll see how it works out. Just got done finishing these front plates, modified them a little bit, welded up one of the holes, cut it. It all seems like it's going to work just fine. Got these other 2 behind it that are mounted to the frame, so I'm going to go through and drill them. It's gonna be kind of hard. The upper holes are, there's not a lot of room for the drill, but I'll figure it out. Now that we have a solid mounting point, I think I can get started on the slider. So what I want to do is 1 3/4 tube. I've got a bunch that I just kind of keep on hand because I use it for a lot of different projects. So I've got ideas of how I want to do this. I think I'm going to put a little bend in it for the front first. Actually, I guess what I'll do is I'll measure my overall length. I'll cut a section, looks like 8 foot or so. I'll make a bend and then maybe like set it up there with my transmission jack and just kind of start eyeballing how I want it to look. Plans are changing. I have a bunch of these pre-bent, a whole bunch of different sizes, because it makes it easy to just grab one and then I can hold it up to what I'm working on, and then I can just kind of decide if I like a 45 or I like a 90 or whatever, you know, a 22. And once I started holding this up here, And I kind of started rolling it around. It's like, man, I really like that high and tight. I like that a lot. And then I started thinking, I guess I don't really need a step. You know, this is, here, for scale, I can easily step up into this truck. So why am I making myself an old man step when I'm 33 years old? I don't know why I've been thinking I need a step this whole time. So I think this is going to turn into just a really simple slider. Just something that looks good, something that's tight against the body, and is going to protect the body a little bit. You know, this body's obviously not in beautiful shape, but I don't want to have a gigantic rock just boom, just bash the whole side of it in and make it look even worse. So I think what we're going to do is bend a 45 for the front, tilt it up high and tight, and then do the same thing for the back. Now I still want to incorporate dimple dies, so I'm going to be using probably a 4-inch strip. I got a bunch of 4-inch by 1/8 thick plate, and I'm just going to put a whole bunch of dimple dies down the center of it. I'm going to show you how I figure out these bends and where to put them. I'll start by showing you my die. So this is an 1 3/4 die, and there's a collar that goes over the end of it. And what I did is I have a bunch of these, like I said earlier, I've got a bunch of these pre-bent and laying in a pile down there. Make some notes on there, so if I bend it at 48 degrees, it'll make a 45 after it springs back. This line right here correlates with this part of the JD2 bender. So what I do is I made a mark before I took this bend off of the bender right here, because I knew that's where I was going to want to cut it. And then whenever I take this pre-bent chunk and I lay it down where I'm going to want it, you know, so what I did is I measured the overall length of this. I kind of marked it on the floor. So once I take and I put that part right there on the floor, I know this is where I'm going to want to cut it. Then I can make a mark on the tube right here that correlates with this mark. And now I know whenever I go and I put this back into the bender to make the opposing bend, that all I have to do is line up this mark with the same in the same place that I would this mark in the machine. I hope that makes sense. It makes sense to me. And so now whenever I line this up, I know that the finish angle is going to end up being right where I want to cut it. Time to come clean, YouTube. I do a lot of guessing whenever I build stuff like this, and this is going to be a good example to show you what I'm talking about. So when I try to make a cut like this, where it's going to be something that's bent, and I want to make sure that I cut a straight edge, and it's kind of hard to find that dimension, what I'll do is I'll measure from the center of my tube to the edge of my table, and then I'll just do the exact same thing at this end, and then I will eyeball a line. Seems ghetto, but I'm telling you, this works pretty well, actually. In this instance, I'm not going to be cutting it flat. It's not going to be just coming off of the truck flat. I don't like that. I want it to come off at the truck, off of the truck at an angle. And in order to kind of bend up and cover a little bit of this, I think it's going to look cool. So I'm guessing when I looked at that, I said, you know what, about 2 2x6s tall is probably the angle I need. It's not a unit of measure for anywhere else but Nate's garage. And then I decided to guess about 3 inches from the center, from the center of the tube to the edge of the table. So once I lined it up about where I wanted it, I took a look at it, drew a line here, a line at the end, and then I'm going to take my 7-inch angle grinder with a cutoff wheel, and I'm going to put this in the vise, and I'm just going to chop it down nice and straight. We'll see if I shoot myself on the foot and have to rebend all this stuff, or if I save a whole bunch of time and this is a successful mission. It worked! It's not the first time I've done backyard mechanic stuff and had it work for me. The only issues, really, and they're not big ones, this is just cut a little bit long on this side, so I'm going to have to cut that and then fill it in with weld. I just kind of split the difference. It's got a little bit of overhang on the back. But yeah, I tacked it all up. Everything's not too bad. There's a couple of little gaps to fill, but nothing major. So, the next step. I want to have dimple dies incorporated into this. So, I'm going to take a chunk of 4-inch flat bar. We'll have to measure it out, figure out how much we need, drill some holes, and then put some dimples in it. Let's drill some holes. I got these all figured out. 1 3/4 hole every foot all the way down. This is a 6-foot long section. That'll give us a little bit of space at the end. So it's just gonna kind of have a gap here, and then it's gonna start with this dimple die section. At the end, I'm gonna use my brake. It's not a great brake, but it is a brake to bend this. And so we're gonna bend this in order to give it rigidity, which is the whole purpose of this anyway. The center of this is going to be a weak link unless you shore it up with something. We could shore it up with other chunks of tube, you know, throughout, but I would rather do it this way. I think this is going to look cool. We've got all of our holes done. It's time to use the metal brake. Now this brake is from Harbor Freight. It's like a $30 piece of equipment. It's not great for this, to be honest with you. It's really good with little pieces of aluminum, stuff like this. But 1/8 inch, believe it or not, is a little bit heavy duty for this little brake. But if you use a crap load of clamps, like I did here, and you just kind of slowly work it, just little by little, you can slowly, now I'm just picking up the table because I'm doing it with one hand, but you can slowly work this material up and get the angle that you're after. So I have the bend approximately where I want it. It looks like a 45 to me. We just need it somewhere close. So I take the angle finder, throw it on the end, and it looks like we are, we're at like a 50. So I just need to bend it a hair more, and I'll be ready to do the other side. So if you haven't seen my other videos where I talk about these, basically what this does is it puts a dimple around this hole, and it gives it strength in the area around the dimple. I didn't go too crazy with the holes on these. I think that it looks a little bit better with less dimples on an application like this. You know, if you're going to do something that's really race, you wanted to lose weight, that's another good reason to have these dimples. You can do holes as close as you can get the die, and you can put dimples all throughout this, and overall you can actually shed a lot of weight on a race vehicle. This is not a race vehicle. This is a Mercedes diesel powered J10 pickup truck. So we're just doing what we think looks good, and then of course this will add some rigidity around the dimple throughout the slider. We have one flat piece of steel and one what looks like to be a leaf spring. This is pretty common. When you use dimple dies, it'll kind of distort the overall span of whatever material you're working on. As you can see, I already straightened this one out. It's very easy. I'll see if I can set the camera down in a way that you can see how I'm doing this. I always just throw it in a vise or something like that, and I just kind of slowly work it straight again. You just kind of give it a little bit of bend. There we go. And you can just slowly work your way down and straighten it all back out. It's real easy. Pulled the sliders off. I'm going to weld all these gaps up real quick, and then I will figure out a good method to mount these plates. I need to hire some extra help in here. It's hard to balance all this stuff when you're just one man. It's barely tilted up there in a way that I was able to work on it, and I was able to kind of trim down the edges to make it to where it fits the way I want it to. So the next step is going to be to weld it on. I like to weld from behind on this kind of thing, so I don't want to do a surface weld all the way down the edge that you can see. I would rather just do like 1.5 inch beads on the back side incrementally all the way down, and hopefully trying to retain this. All right, you see what I'm talking about. I need to get some help in here. So I'm going to weld it from the back side and try to keep it all down flat, so when I have a finished product, I'm hoping it'll be like as flat as this table. We'll see how I do. This is why my gloves look like this. I'll forget to put my welding gloves on, and a little pop, a little burn here, a little spatter there. Yeah, it is what it is. Almost done. What I need to do now is fill this in. So I went and looked in my bulk bin back there of just scrap stuff from past projects, and I got this 2-inch flat bar. It's a little heavier duty than I need, but that's fine. It'll make to where I can just cut some 2-inch sections, then weld squares on the holes. What do you think? Finally finished these bad boys. I like them. I think that they're low profile. I don't think that they're too big and bulky. I'm really glad that I decided last minute not to do a step. I think that would have turned this into a little bit more of a grandpa looking truck. And on a 31, it doesn't need a step. I think it looks much better with a low profile slider like this. And I think it does match the front bumper, kind of with the overall feel and theme. So what that means is that I need to build a rear bumper to match. I have lots of ideas in my head, but once again, I won't know until I start building it how it's going to turn out. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I would say that anybody could build these. Sliders are so simple, and you don't need high-end tools in order to build them. It's one of my favorite things about building things like this. The JD2 bender that I use is great, and I'm really happy to have it, but I used to build things like this all the time with a Harbor Freight pipe bender. And they're not the best, but it was like 150 bucks, and I can build sliders with it. I can build bumpers, you know. So don't let some of the expensive tools I use discourage you from trying a project like this. These are seriously very simple. It's a good way to teach yourself welding is on things like this, because honestly, it doesn't have to be super pretty. My welds aren't pretty. You don't have to have a great welder. You see my welding setup. It's just a catalog welder from Northern Tool. So anybody seriously can build stuff like this. I get a lot of comments of people saying they want to take the plunge and buy a welder and start learning how to fabricate. Do it. I didn't have anybody teach me. Just one day I bought a welder because I wanted to start sticking metal together, and it's been a fantastic learning experience for me, and I cannot recommend it enough. If you liked the video, make sure you hit the like button. Subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. I've got a whole bunch of J10 fabrication, just stuff like that on here. I've got a whole bunch more projects like that coming up. Support us on Patreon. If you want to follow me on Instagram, I'm at BleepinJeepNate. We'll see you next time.